Well, here at the Australian Music Vault today, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome one of the most unique and original voices in the Australian music scene, Ms. Angie Hart. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Born in Adelaide, raised in Tasmania. Were you raised in a hippie commune? Is that true?
Yeah, I wouldn't even call it a commune. We thought we were different, and so we called it a community. So it was. I think it's now registered as a cult, but
Wow.
at the time it was a community. So we were an ecumenical church that did urban mission work. That was our
Urban
thing.
mission work.
Yes, anything you want to think. It's all behind me now.
Yeah. Was that going to doors and raising money or?
No, we had a central, so there was a community within one of the suburbs of Melbourne and in a suburb. And so we had a central house, and then we had houses that branched off from that and houses that were a bit further out from that, and we all shared. So it was all share houses, and we had prayer mornings, and we had a coffee shop, and we had an aged care facility, and so it was all on site. We had a youth drop-in centre and all sorts of different things, and you were encouraged at any age to volunteer and put in a certain amount of hours during the week. We had a food co-op, all sorts of, bit of everything.
What did you volunteer and do?
Put a lot of peanut butter into jars. Ran the pianola at the aged care, sang Daisy, Daisy a lot. Give me your answer, do you?
How old were you when you were singing
made
Daisy?
Coffee at the coffee shop. How old was I? Oh, probably, 11, 12. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I loved the pianola. That was awesome.
Is that when you discovered your voice?
No. So my mum and dad sang in church, so they were, and my sister played piano, so I come from a musical family. But and I liked singing in church, but no, I didn't. I ended up going to St Martin's Youth Centre, and I got a part in a play, which was a 5-piece choir, which then I mimed my part because I got really shy. But I was really excited that I passed the audition, so it ignited something in me.
Did you stay with the theatre for very long?
Yeah, it was a bit of a saving grace. I had a really great time there. It was a interesting, very interesting start to my life. So something like a youth theatre was really, formative and a place where I felt like I could be heard and do my own thing. So that was, But soon after that, Simon Austin asked if I wanted to join a band. So it was quite whirlwind. Yeah, I did a year or two in the theatre, and then it all started.
At 14, your parents split.
Yep.
Do you remember that time well?
Yes. I think everyone remembers if their parents split, but I remember it being a great relief. I think some kids are pretty upset when that happens, but I think I exhaled deeply. So I think it was a good thing for both of them, and I think it was great for us, not right away, but yeah.
So you went to live with your mother. How did life change for you?
Well, right at that time, we decided to move out of the community as well. So we moved into another share house because
that's what you did.
That's living. And I was still trying to finish high school, which I'd never finished. I tried a couple of times. But during that time, I started going to the Punters Club, and that was another life-changing theatre, shall we say, for me, where I met Simon Austin, who was working behind the bar, and he eventually had to kick me out of the venue, which is how I guess we became friends, because I was an underage drinker at the pub, and he was starting a band, and the rest is history.
So it's fair to say that without the Punters Club, there would be no Frente.
It is fair to say that.
How integral was the Punters Club for people that weren't around Brunswick Street or Melbourne at that time?
I think it brought a lot of people into the Fitzroy area, which I think, it was a bunch of loners. Like it was a great place for unique people that had no particular place to all convene and find each other. So I think it played a really big part in housing an eclectic range of music, so people were able to express themselves however they wanted, and there was a venue that would have audiences for that, or to just go and hang out and be with like-minded or not like-minded people that totally suited you. Yeah.
Can you remember some of the characters that used to frequent the bar there?
One of my favourite memories is not particularly of one person but of an event. The dog poo exhibition was my favourite thing that happened at the Punters Club because it was a big dog pub. So people would always bring their dogs in. And somebody, I don't know who did it, decided they collected donations of everybody's different dog's poo and put them onto masonite boards and lacquered them with the dog's name underneath and hung that all around the front bar. It's one of the best exhibitions I've ever seen.
How have I not heard of this?
It's one of my favourite things about the pub.
So tell me about Simon Austin. What drew you to Simon Austin, who would become your songwriting partner in Frente?
Yeah. Well, he was, drinking a lot of the post-mix, the Coca-Cola post-mix from the bar. So he was a very up-vibe person. And that really attracted me at the time, somebody that, generated a lot of great energy. And he knew what he wanted from the band right away, which I just discovered I could sing, like literally within the last 6 months. And he was like, do you want to be in a band? And I was like, I'll give that a go. And I'd been writing a lot at home, not songs, just poetry and whatnot. And I loved music. And I thought that would be really fun. And he had a complete direction. And I didn't audition or anything. I just joined. And then we started writing together. And it was exactly what I wanted.
You talk about the other two members of Frente, Tim O'Connor and Mark Picton, having a tolerance for you in those early days. What did you mean by that?
Well, I was a lot younger than everyone else in the band, and it was my first band. Like, I'm sure that would have been, once again, they knew what they wanted too, I think, from the band, and everyone was already writing and they were already, they've probably all already been in bands and done all the stuff that I was just learning to do. I learnt how to use a microphone at our rehearsals. That was the first time I'd ever done that. And then Simon and I eventually started dating, like further into the band's history, our life, and then we broke up, and that must have been awful for them. That must have been the most boring, intolerable situation to watch these two people just go through this thing that you probably saw coming. And then having to tour with them. Yeah, so I would say that they tolerated me and us for quite a while.
You almost didn't make it to your first ever Frente show, did you?
Correct. Yeah,
What
because I
happened?
was underage. So I used to drink at the pub all the time, but I think they got into a bit of trouble with other things and they had to tighten their belts a bit. And so they brought in some harsher restrictions than what they had before. And so they had to, kick out anyone that was underage. They had, it was very performative. But
Yes.
we booked a gig, and which we got, I think, because another band cancelled. That's how we got our first show in the first place. And then they said, we're sorry, we can't actually have you on the premises, so you'll have to wait outside until it's your turn to play, and then you can come in and play, but then you'll have to leave. Which is what we did.
Oh, that's harsh.
So, I was totally up for it because it's so exciting to play our first show. And we played our first set, all of our songs twice because we didn't have enough songs. It was, very sweet.
You recently wrote that you cried after every show you performed because you felt that you weren't getting it. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, I think I was pretty bad to start with, and I wasn't wrong. So I found out later that a lot of people had asked the rest of the band when they were going to get a real singer. So I think I was pretty awful when we started. I just didn't have any technique, and I was really shy. I just wouldn't look up at all or talk, and I didn't know how to use the mic properly, and I sang very quietly, and I couldn't pitch. Like, it was all of that stuff. I just didn't have a handle on it yet, and I knew it, and I'd come off stage just really frustrated because I think I really did want to do it, and which is why I stuck with it.
Yeah.
But it was pretty embarrassing to be that person and know that you had to work through all that in front of everybody.
Wow.
Yeah, but I think there was something deep down that was like, I will stay, I will keep doing this, but this is awful for everybody. Yeah.
See, I don't think so, because I remember Labour of Love coming out at 91, your first single from the World EP, and that being an absolute breath of fresh air on alternative radio. I mean, it was thrashed on Triple R, but it was the sound of a new Australian identity, new music.
Yeah, that was a really amazing thing to have happen. And once again, for me, I just joined a band, so that was really enough for me. So it was really the whole idea of recording songs and putting them out and thinking about where they'd go or what might happen after that hadn't really occurred to me. So it was all a really, I guess you would say, a pleasant surprise.
And it was wonderful as a young girl watching the rise of Frente, because you became my favourite band for a time there. And the scene was really finding itself.
Yeah.
We had pubs like the Punters, the Evelyn across the road. We had the Rob Roy up the road. We had the Art House. It seemed like a really fertile time, but it also seemed like a time where there was no limits and no boundaries. And to watch Frente grow, I think that was really, really special. And I like that you were unaffected by everything. You were just out there giving it a shot. Did you feel you got better as you went along?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So that time passed. I still, was very, very self-conscious when we performed for a very long time. I think it took me about 15 years. So I had stage fright for probably 20 years of my career. But I do think that my technique improved, and then I did start to understand how to perform live on stage, which, was really satisfying.
Did you ever take lessons?
I tried. Yeah, I was really bad at that too. I'm not, putting myself down. These things did not go well for me. So I did, find my way. I feel really happy with my voice, and I love singing, and I've built my own technique, and that works. I have friends that are teachers, and when they come to my gigs, I feel bad for them because I know my technique is wrong, but it's working for me. It's
yours.
My own.
It's your voice. I want to talk about a very important woman in Frente's history that I don't think gets enough credit, Linda Gebar. She was your manager, your first manager.
Yes.
At what point did she see you and take you on?
I think we begged her to I remember when she said yes, because we were ecstatic, because I think we badgered for quite a while before she would consider taking us.
So how did you meet Linda or know about Linda?
We met her at the Punters Club.
Of course.
Yeah, and I remember, talking about it a number of times. We've asked Linda, and we're waiting to see what she might say. And when she said yes, I remember having such a big celebration, because that was our first manager. It was our first big thing. I remember I don't know if you know, Kirsty Rivers also worked for her, so it was a great female hub, and that was a wonderful start for me. Very supported, and lots of great bands working under Linda as well. So we did a bit of work with the Black Eyed Susans during that time, which was really awesome for us, and the Killjoys. Yeah, so it was a really sweet time.
How would you describe Linda for those who never got to meet her, God rest her soul?
I know that it's a very overused term, but she was a pioneer at that stage, because I think she came up in a very male-dominated management scenario, or the industry scenario, where it was very hard to be heard or taken seriously, and she was very driven and pushy in the best possible way, and she knew what she wanted for her artists, and that was quite rare at the time, and she achieved it. So she set up an office, and she grew it, and she made a very successful thing out of it. So, yeah, definitely a pioneer.
How long did Linda end up managing you for?
I think we were with her for a good 2 to 3 years. So that was the growing part of Frente, and most of our Australian career, when all of the big stuff happened, we did all that with Linda. Yeah.
Labour of Love. Let's go back to that song, because, as I said, it was the one that really, it started everything for you, and it was your first single. What was that about?
So that's a song that Simon generated and brought me into. So I feel like that's one of it definitely was an apprenticeship for me to start with. So that song was like a thing that he had almost finished, really. Like he says, we wrote it together, and I think that's very generous, but it's really his song. And he had worked on that for a long time, and it's obviously about unrequited love, but a beautifully sophisticated take on it, I think, yeah. So I was really lucky to fall into that song.
Your next single, Ordinary Angels, explodes in a big way. That was written after a few to and fro arguments with Simon. Take me back to that moment. You were trying to write that song.
Yeah. Yeah, so we became quite we're both really big people pleasers to start with, but we were very ambitious, and at that stage we were shopping for a label deal, and we had a couple of labels interested in us, and I don't think we needed to really offer them anything, but we told them that we would give them a brand new song if they signed us. So, and this was with Ruart. I think we were doing a demo deal with them, and which I don't know why we thought we even needed to do that. But then we'd set this deadline that we had to give them a new song, and that was we had a day to do it in, and that's when we were in Sydney, and we sat down to try and write this song, which of course we'd really set ourselves up for failure there because it was just too big of an ask, and it had to be the best song in the world.
Write a song and write it now.
That was a good idea. So, yeah, we ended up having a massive fight and both in tears, just sitting there feeling like total fuckheads. And
what did you fight about, though?
About trying to write this song.
Trying to write the best song in the world
We just
ever.
imploded. Like, we were just sitting in a room just trying so hard to write this song and nothing came.
Were you still together at this stage?
I reckon we probably were, yeah. And, yeah, so we ended up in tears, and as we were sitting there sobbing, this song came out. We started back and forth with this song, and we realised we were kind of onto something. We must have really needed to clear the decks to get this one out. And, yeah, that's the day that we wrote that song in tears.
You've said now that it's one of your favourite Frente songs ever. What do you love about it?
It's a perfect puzzle. I really like that. So whenever I'm performing it, I really love the composition. I feel I can hear the work in it, and I love that about it. And then I love the melody. It's just a joy to sing. I love that it's about being yourself, because I think that really encapsulates what we've tried to do as a band. But yeah, it's got a really good beat, and you get on stage, and it's a really fun one to perform.
How did life change for you after Ordinary Angels?
That was our first video too. So that's when we went into trying to be a visual band, which was very difficult for us because we didn't understand what that entailed. So then we were on TV, so that was a really interesting start in our career where, for me particularly, I started getting recognised, and that was a whole different part of things.
Did you enjoy the fame aspect?
Not at the time. Yeah, I didn't. And I think, like I said about joining a band and just seeing, just enjoying it for actually making music and getting started in something, I just hadn't really figured out that might be a part of it, and I wasn't really prepared to deal with that kind of thing. It wasn't for me.
Imagine what it would have been like if social media had been around.
I know. I do think about that. I feel quite lucky that we didn't have to, be posting every day or taking pictures of every single thing that happened in our lives. I feel like a lot of stuff happened under the radar, which is, that is a lovely safe haven. But then when it happens, like in that era, television was such a big deal then. So it was like when you're on telly, people think you're driving around in limos all the time, which is, or not the case.
How did your family react?
I think they thought it was pretty, I don't know, my family's pretty down to earth. So it's not like they, nobody lost their heads over it. But I think they thought it was pretty cool.
Your sister was working at Charmaine's Ice Cream, which was next door to the Punters Club. Did she start to get hassled or, hassle for free tickets or, hey, you're Angie Hart's sister?
Well, she inadvertently got me the gig, so that was thanks to her. So she did a trial at the Punters learning how to pull beers, and Simon gave her the trial, and he said, I'm starting a band. Do you know anyone that might want to be in a band? And she said, my sister. And that's how that actually began.
I don't think people realise how young you were when the whole Frente phenomenon was starting here in Australia.
Yeah.
How did you cope with, we talked briefly about the fame, but just the journey, the adventure. You were in your teens.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was definitely wasted on me. So, yeah, I was too young. So in one way, it's great because I think I did just go on and be myself because I hadn't kind of worked out how to be anybody else yet, which was helpful. But I didn't cope with it very well. And I didn't have any ambitions about traveling or anything like that. So traveling, I was like, I missed home and I wanted to be with my high school friends and eat the same food every day and all that kind of stuff. I just wasn't very adventurous. Wow. And, somebody else would have probably really enjoyed that spot. Yeah.
Yeah, because all the touring started. I mean, once you have a hit single, all the touring starts.
Yeah.
The late Archie Roach spoke very favourably about you. I remember the Turn Up the TV tour that you were on with Archie. And it seemed that everyone was enamoured by you. What do you remember about the late Archie, great Uncle Archie?
I have one lovely story about Archie sitting in the hotel room with he and Ruby and Dave Arden, and he said to me that I think you're really plain, but you sing like a bird. I'm going to call you Little Magpie, which I thought it's obviously stuck with me. It's the most beautiful thing.
Oh.
I loved every part of that because I feel like he was saying that I was a very regular person that could sing and to keep it real, I guess, was a beautiful thing to say. But watching them play every night on that tour was an intense honour.
Wow.
Yeah.
I read a quote where you said, I've had an ongoing battle with alcohol. I go in and out of having a healthy relationship with it, if I'm honest. I've had a period of drugs in my life too. Was that what you were trying to kind of battle whilst you were in Frente?
I think it's a really common thing in music, and if you've had an interesting upbringing, I think that there's often going to be something that's gonna call your name. And I'm quite an introverted person as well, so I think dealing with the highs and lows of just the adrenaline, even of playing on stage, and then not wanting to be looked at afterwards. I'm just one of those people like, just don't look at me.
I want to run and hide.
Yeah, I think that's played a big part in where I've coped and not coped with any kind of drugs and alcohol use. So I still struggle with that. I just, I've done all sorts of different therapies and tried different kind of spiritualities and all sorts of anything you can think of. And I think sometimes you just really want to shut that stuff up, and that's a tough one.
Yeah. How are you controlling it these days?
Post-pandemic, not the best ever in the whole entire world.
No one.
I feel like that's been a couple of steps back for me. But I think that I'm having the, for want of a better term, the realest life that I've had so far, and I'm really enjoying being over 50 and just kind of not judging where I'm at each day and slowing down and just letting it, roll on a little bit, and having a wonderful relationship with my partner and my child, and just being honest with where we're at, which is, really good.
Frente played Summer Bay, home and away, in 1993. Tell me about that time, because that was promotion that your record company Mushroom couldn't dream of paying for. I mean, it's such an honour. And of course, Home and Away is seen in the UK as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember much about that day? I think you performed 3 songs.
Yeah, as seems to be the theme with when I'm talking to you. I didn't understand at the time how big it was until, years later we toured through the UK, and that really resonated over there. It's one of the reasons that everybody had heard of us was that we were on Home and Away. Apparently it's a really big deal over there. So on the day, it was Angel's first day on set, so we were part of a really iconic episode.
Melissa George, yes.
Yeah. So, and that was fun. I'm like watching this young actor and we're hanging out and having a chat and encouraging each other in our, our big moments kind of thing. And I just, once again, didn't understand what a big deal it was, which is probably for the best.
It wouldn't be your first time on set, though. Much later, you would end up in 2002 on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, performing Blue. In fact, you appeared twice. Yeah. How on earth did a girl from Melbourne end up on Buffy, a cult and much loved US series?
Well, that show and Joss Whedon they were very big supporters of music, so we were playing around town a lot. And when I first moved there,
So this is in LA, right?
Sorry, in
Yeah.
LA,
Yeah.
yeah. One of the first people that I met when I moved there that became a really good friend was his ex-wife, Kai, who, we're still friends to this day. And so they became my family, which
Wow.
was, really awesome at the time. And they were a wonderful haven for me and really supported my music. And Joss gave me and my ex-partner like great opportunities to be on television for entire songs instead of the snippets that you see most, people get played in the background or they have, they're like, just like on for 2 seconds.
snippet, yeah.
Yeah, he would play
Yeah.
whole songs, which is, you don't get that.
Well, let's go back a bit. 1996, you support Alanis Morrisette in the States.
Yes.
In fact, the American record company was incredibly behind you. You're very, very lucky.
We were, yeah.
It was probably Bizarre Love Triangle that opened the door. Just a B-side that you put together.
Yeah.
In fact, you were really great at B-sides. I remember Frente doing some really, really beautiful B-sides. Talk me through the whole US college campus thing with Frente.
It was a really lucky time. So, I feel like I'm digressing already, but I feel like we had some really lucky moments like that with Alanis's record. Her record just broke and we toured that whole record with her.
It was a massive record, wasn't it?
Yeah, and we toured through Europe with Crowded House when they released Woodface, which once again is like, how lucky can you be to get the spot on the tour when that thing breaks and is the iconic record that the band gets known for. So they
would have been full houses right throughout.
Yeah, I feel really grateful and, passionate people. And it was a great time where people did come and listen to the support act and were open to new music and had longer attention spans.
True.
Yeah, so that was amazing. Bizarre Love Triangle, which we released on the back of Labour of Love. We took Labour of Love as our first song to the US and put BLT, as we affectionately call it, on the back side of that. And it got played one day at college radio and they just started getting calls right away. And that started happening all across America. And then this B-side became a single. And then we got to go on all of the college festival circuits that went around the US. And so we'd be sharing stages with Green Day and the Pretenders and Beck and Dinosaur Jr. and repetitively, like Pavement, just going all around America with these same bands turning up in all the spots, and just that was a really golden time, a very magical thing to be a part of.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you make some firm friendships with some of those bands?
No. I was really shy. It's the only thing, like people say, if you have any regrets, and I don't, except I just wish that I had even said hello to anybody. Even Neil Finn gave me his number and said, call me anytime. I never called him because I am so painfully shy, and I'm much better at it now.
Yeah.
But I hid the whole time. I just would either be backstage or I'd get someone to walk with me to the toilet, and just I wouldn't talk to anybody. Such a dickhead.
I wouldn't go as far as that, but
yeah.
What was Paul Hester like? I mean, again,
Lovely.
were you too shy to because he was such a larrikin.
Yeah, he was probably the easiest to talk to because he was such a kid himself, and he was always really like he was one of the kind of people that would seek out someone that he thought maybe needed a bit of help or whatnot, and he was really lovely. So had people that would come in and champion, but I was pretty hard to reach.
At what point did you and Simon break up as partners?
I think we broke up pretty much right before we started touring overseas.
Right.
So that was, and we toured overseas for at least 2 to 3 years. So that was a pretty long period of time to be exes on the road with each other.
Was that tough?
Yeah.
It must be tough.
Yeah, it was pretty messy. I think it was, as I said before, even more unpleasant for the rest of the band because it was just messy and there was a lot of tension and differing of opinions and people just trying to live their next life. So Simon and I were trying to move on whilst being in each other's pockets. And
in a microcosm of...
so that was pretty rough. I feel like we've only just worked some of that stuff out now because that's big stuff to do together intensely for that amount of time. We're still deeply good friends, which is amazing that we did that.
Because you've been playing Frente shows, which has been wonderful to see you back. And it must be satisfying for you because all of those insecurities, I hope, have left you.
Yeah. I obviously have been quite self-deprecating in this, but I'm talking about past Angie, and I'm having a really wonderful time in the band. I'm having a great time with Simon, and it's really lovely to be on stage, really living inside those songs and living with all of the things that happen in the band or the external stuff that went on, being on stage and being totally cool with all of that. It's I don't think you always get the chance to go back over things that way, and so it's been pretty amazing.
The albatross around your neck. If I say albatross, what springs to mind?
I know what you're talking about.
I know. And I'm sure you're sick of talking about it because you can't read anything without reading The Albatross That Is Accidentally Kelly Street, which was such a beautiful song. It was light and happy. It was Tim O'Connor's experience of moving to Kenny Street, Richmond. It's on the bus tours even. When you take an Australian Music Vault bus tour, you see Kenny Street just around the corner from Molly Meldrum's house. But it's the friggin' albatross around Angie Hart / Frente's neck. Does that shit you a bit?
Not anymore.
Not anymore?
Yeah, but it did, yeah. So once again, it was a particular time in my life. So I think I was at that, so I would have been, I guess, 20 when that happened, 19, 20 years old, when it became our biggest song, and then it became the song that everybody hated us for, or in my eyes that's the way it seemed, and I just wasn't equipped for that. So I was still, very thin-skinned and trying to work out who I wanted to be and learning to be well known at the same time, learning to be in a successful band. And it was that schoolyard feeling where it all turned and I didn't know where to be.
Yeah.
So that was really hard. And and then I talked about that a lot. And so every interview I do ever in my whole entire life.
Oh, yeah. It's going to follow you around forever.
Yeah, about the backlash of Kelly Street. At the time, I just wanted to go and have a beer at the Punters Club and be still accepted there. And I feel that we were in a phase in the 90s where there was a lot of kind of, you're in or you're out kind of stuff that happened during that era that's really past now. We were very genre-based and very cliquey about what worked and what didn't, and I really needed to stay under the radar within that realm, and then I was like completely unsafe. I was out. I would go to the Punters Club and people would look over and be like, and it would just feel devastating. It's like, this is my home, and now I'm the person. I remember at the time too, which is hilarious, that Mambo gave us all this free clothing, which I don't know if you remember. It was really colourful.
Oh, yeah, Mambo clothing
So
and
colourful.
Reg Mombasa's very, very identifiable drawings on the Mambo clothes, designs.
Which I was like, yay, I loved it.
Free clothes.
So I remember turning up to the Punters Club in every colour that you can imagine when everyone else is wearing their black and velvet, and then wondering why everyone's looking at me in the way that they are, in disgust, and just looking at myself and just there's not much can be done about this. Yeah.
One record you sang on that I felt didn't get the dues it deserves was 1998's Tingly. It was a side project with you on vocals, and it's most possibly one of the most beautiful pop love songs, electro-pop love songs, made by two Melbourne musicians who got you to sing on it as almost like a demo, but it was sent to Richard Kingsmill at Triple J and again exploded because the vocals are so beautiful. And yet mushroom hampered, I think it's fair to say mushroom hampered the success that song could have been. Is that fair to say?
I don't know. So that's one part, that came to my knowledge later. I don't know what part they played in that and whether that's true or not. But, I do know that song was very well loved. And, I've heard from the band that they had a lot of trouble dealing with mushrooms. So then that would be fair to say that it's probably true. Yeah. It didn't come to me, which, maybe it could have been different. Who knows?
Well, it made number 96 on the Triple J Hottest 100 that year, and they wouldn't even give the band the money to make the video clip. So, because Rage always plays the top Hottest 100,
right.
and there was no video clip to Tingly ever
Which
made.
was so important at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of video clips, do you resent the childlike quality of Accidentally Kelly Street?
Yeah, if I could go back and do that again, I would, but then we wouldn't be the band that we are. So, we had no idea, as I said, about the visuals and what to do in a clip, and I didn't really understand, which is quite obvious when you watch the video, about how large movements need to be in front of the screen. And so I just didn't know that you didn't really have to perform.
Yeah, right.
You could just sing your song.
Yeah.
And I wasn't quite sure what to do. And video clips are really expensive, and we had this massive set, and it's like, well, I better be something while we're on. So while the camera's rolling, I will do a thing. And I didn't know what that thing would be. I've never known what to do with my arms or any other part of myself.
I used to love the way you used to perform on stage with your hands behind your back.
I still do. It's the best place for your arms.
Yeah.
Just hold on to them.
Yep. I never saw the US video for Accidentally Kelly Street because you completely started again. What's that like?
Quite sedate.
Of course. No movement.
Still a lot of bright colour.
Yeah.
So we did that with Polly Borland and John Hillcoat. They did a
Wow.
They did a remake of Kelly Street, because by the time we released it overseas, it had been like 2 or 3 years, and it was a chance to redo it, and we wanted a more current thing that went with how we now looked, like we were going to be touring it. And so it was an excellent opportunity to revisit it and go back in and do another clip. And it's quite mature.
The Bizarre Love Triangle video is quite sedate as well. It's literally you in the centre with your band members walking around you.
Which we also did with Polly and John. Yeah, we did some lovely work with them. It was really quite focused and very simple concepts, and just allowing us to just be ourselves in that space. And that was really nice to be able to, kind of find our way with an aesthetic that we could just be a band inside that.
Marvin the Album sold 1.5 million copies, Angie. A lot of bands always talk about not making money when they're at the height of their fame. Did you see much coin? I'm not asking, I'm not prying. I'm just saying, did you see much of the return of that?
We saw some. I feel like a lot of it probably went on the next record and on touring. So none of us were driving around in fancy cars, and I stupidly didn't put a deposit on a house. So that probably was the time that I could have done that. But I didn't have $1 million. I got a few, tens of thousands, which was an amazing thing for a young person.
Yeah. What did you buy?
Clothes.
But not Mambo.
That I don't fit into anymore, so not even an investment. Nothing of great import. And food. When you're touring, the most important thing is finding a toilet, finding a good place to eat, and then, maybe some clothes that you can wear on stage.
I always found that on tour or just even backstage, they'd never thought about the women in the band needing a dressing room. Did you find that?
Yeah. For most of our touring life, I was the only female on the road, and everyone was a fair bit older than me. That kind of evened out as we went along. But as a young person trying to find my space, and I was the person that was supposed to be, don't have to be, but I felt that I was the person that needed to be wearing the stage clothes and the makeup, and so I needed a little space to work that stuff out in.
Well, speaking of clothes, you were you were without any when you appeared naked apart from some strategically placed beads.
Yes.
On Juice magazine, which
Yes.
is no longer going. For someone so painfully shy, that must have been quite confronting for yourself.
Oh, it's funny. The degrees of shyness are interesting as a performer. I don't know if you have that complexity of what that you really love to perform. Like I really love to perform. And before I joined Frente, I used to do modelling for art classes and all that kind of. I loved that whole world. Wasn't afraid to go skinny dipping. I don't mind being naked, but terrified of being approached in public because of who I am or being judged, all of that kind of stuff. So the juice thing wasn't that far-fetched at the time. I once again didn't really realise the impact of that or think about why I was doing it. So I was 21. I think, it was probably a pretty strange thing to do at that point in my career.
Strange?
Yeah, I think I was really trying to bust out of the Frente mould. Like we'd come a certain way along, and I think I was trying to assert my independence a little bit and work out what I wanted to do with this scenario that had happened in my life where I was all of a sudden in a band that had become successful. So I think it was a bit of a step out, and the interview was the first one where I talked about my personal life instead of the band. So it was a particular, this is me moment, which I just don't know if it was the best foot forward.
What kind of personal things did you reveal at that point?
I think it's the first time I talked about, I remember because that particular magazine followed me to Japan where they used that as the only reference for my next lot of interviews. And so every interview started with, so how is your relationship with your father? Which is a really confronting way to start a music interview. And I ended up, having a bit of a meltdown after the 12th interview of having to talk about my personal or field my personal life. I talked about my relationship with my parents and talked about my sexual orientation and probably started talking about anxiety at that stage, my mental health, and a bit
which
of
wasn't much discussed at that point, was it? Mental health wasn't a thing then, was it? I mean, now we place so much importance on it. After the success of Marvin the Album, which it went through the roof here in this country, it is still a fantastic album from start to finish to listen to. I think the songwriting and the arrangements and I think just your vocals and the lyrics, No Time, I just think is just still stands up as just a beautifully crafted pop song. But it was interesting what was going on around you and Simon and the rest of the band because your follow-up record, Shape, it was like it maybe should have been called Shake because you were determined to shake everything off that had kind of got you to where you got to. Is that fair to say?
It's a really good call. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we played live so much in between the making of Marvin and Shape as well. So we'd finally kind of arrived as a live band and found we'd evolved and found something that really fascinated us with what we were doing with our sound. So there was a combination of we're never going back there again. And then also this is some stuff that we found that's exciting. But there was, definitely a shake-off happening there as well.
A very expensive experimental record.
Expensive as well.
Expensive.
You nearly said that and you were right.
How expensive was it?
Well, at the time it was. Yeah. It was accidentally expensive. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you used some pretty big names for that one.
We did. It became a protracted exercise, so it was meant to be 1 month recording and then maybe 2 weeks of mixing, and that didn't quite happen. And we were in the UK during Christmas holiday time and ended up having to get studio space at a moment's notice for another 2 weeks. So we paid top dollar to finish the record, and it just blew out like a bad house renovation. It was, all of a sudden very expensive.
I think the standout track for me is Sit on My Hands. I used to love playing that on Triple J, and you released an EP, I remember, with remixes, and I used to really delve into those remixes as well.
Cool. Yeah.
How do you feel about the record when you listen to it?
It's been a favourite, I think, probably of Simon and mine from the get-go, the thing with that record, which we felt with Marvin as well, but I feel it really keenly with Shape, was that the doing of it was the most joyous part. So whatever happened with it, we didn't care because we just really wanted it to sound a certain way, and it did. So, yeah, I think we were really happy with it. I still am.
When did you know Frente was over?
I think we were in Malaysia. I think it was New Year's Eve. I'm pretty sure that was the exact moment. And
Right.
it just stopped.
What happened?
Yeah, just the wall came down inside my head. And, yeah, for the whole band, I think we were we couldn't push it any further at that time. And, we just decided to have a very long hiatus, which, was pretty much a breakup.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I moved to LA, and Simon eventually moved to New York. So we were sharing the coasts of the same country. We got to kind of gingerly dip the toe back in that way, which was a good way to do it.
You fall in love with the guitarist from Alanis Morissette's band,
Yep.
Jesse,
Yeah.
and make a record. We make two records, I think,
Yeah, we did.
under the name Splendid, which Mushroom Australia released here.
Yeah.
Is that a bittersweet time for you?
Yeah, I loved making music with Jesse. It was a great musical project to be a part of. I feel like so my publishing at the time and all through Frente was with Warner Chappell, and they were incredibly supportive of this project. So we wrote, I don't know, a good 50 to 100 songs. We wrote a lot, and we would just go. We had no management at that time, and we would just go in there. They had a demo studio on premises, and just go and demo as much as we wanted on site and run all the songs by them. And it was just a real, and they would set us up with lots of different people to collaborate with. So we wrote with the guy that wrote Top of the World from the Carpenters, and really honed my chops as a songwriter. So that was a really great thing to do, just kind of knuckle down and work really hard.
Was it refreshing being in a place where nobody knew you, nobody knew your history, no one had heard Accidentally Kelly Street?
Yeah, it was. Still, people, we were quite well known in America anyway, but the thing about LA, it doesn't matter who you are. So you could walk down the street, and if people do recognise you, that they'll tell you that they love your music, which is really, but it's in a way that's not like you're famous or I know who you are. It's like you do a pretty good job. I'm a fan of your work, which is a very different tone. So I did like that.
We talked about Buffy. Were there any other pinch me kind of moments that you particularly remember?
I remember doing a Writers in the Round this is probably still with Frente, I think, in New York. I did some songwriting with this guy, Jules Shear, who he wrote If She Knew What She Wanted for the Bangles and All Through the Night for Cyndi Lauper. Beautiful musician. He does, gorgeous, beautiful melodies and really simple stuff that you can keep at its most basic or build it up to whatever you want it to be. So he and I did a song together which ended up on Shape, I think, So Mad. And then we did a Writers in the Round in New York, and Carole King came, which was just like, can you fucking believe it? And I couldn't talk to her because that's me. So she came into the room, and I just burnt this hole in the carpet with my eyes while she stood there, and eventually she left, and I hadn't spoken to her because I just couldn't do it.
Angie!
Yes, that's probably the biggest thing that ever happened. There's lots of things that people think are very fancy, but the Carole King moment is in this small room with her. I remember every detail of the carpet because it was very interesting at that moment.
By 2004, it was sadly all over with Jesse. It just imploded.
Yeah, it was never good. So we were not a good match. We were great with music, and I think we were really respectful of the fact that we were not good for each other and it didn't work, and I feel like it ended well in that way, but it was not a good relationship ever. So I feel really good about leaving. I feel good about coming back here and starting my life again.
Well, that was my next question. Coming from LA to a Melbourne that was possibly quite different from when you'd left.
Yeah.
What changes did you see, or how did you assimilate back into life again?
It's really refreshing. I think one of the first things that I noticed when I came back to Melbourne was it had stopped being a scene, and it wasn't genre based anymore. It was a community. There was something. It was a really different vibe about it, and I was older, and yet I found that in Melbourne there was no ageism happening in the scene. Like, I really felt that everyone was there to help each other out, and so you would and my position in music had diminished, and in the scene, like, I wasn't known, and I could go and once again just sit in the front bar before a gig or play some pool and then do sound check and enjoy this beautiful scene that was now happening. And I really appreciate that. So it was nice to tour on a grassroots level again and get to know some of the bands that were happening at that time. It was good.
In 2005, you formed Holidays in Ice with Dean Manning from Leonardo's Bride. You made 3 albums in total.
Yeah.
He's such a wonderful songwriter, isn't he?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very special records. But 2006, you released your solo record, your first solo record. It was about darn time, Angie. It was called Grounded Bird. First single, Cold Hard Killer. Is that about your ex-husband?
Maybe. It might be.
I love that song.
Thanks.
2009, you released Eat My Shadow. Jim Magini, no less.
Yeah.
Midnight Oil plays keyboards. You've got the cream of the crop too. Pete Luscombe from Paul Kelly's band. I mean, Vicar and Linda, and just countless other bands, Rockwiz. Shane Nicholson as well.
Yeah. Yes, I've been really lucky with my records that I've done solo. Some incredible players on both records. Cam Butler is another amazing person that was involved with both of those records, either songwriting with me or string arranging, which he does an incredible string arrangement, as you might know, quite lush. And it's been really grounded bird to just write songs that say I rather than we or you. That's apparently what I needed to do.
There's a song on there called Dark Days Over, and I thought that was quite a telling title. Did you feel your dark days were over?
From time to time. You get the song in and then you have your next arc. But, it was one of those moments of, getting through a pretty dark period. And writing both of those records, I feel like, exercised a few demons.
You also worked extensively with Ben Lee. Now, that's another artist who has had his share of naysayers over the years. Definitely.
Yeah.
I imagine Ben's experiences were quite relatable to yours. Did you connect on that level?
We didn't talk about that a lot, but I think we did connect in being two really, we're both misfits in our own kind of way. And so I think we just appreciated each other in that regards. And we'd both come out of long-term relationships right at the time that we started writing. So we were both, when you just feel like you've got no skin, just totally walking around like this, like beyond naked. And that was a really great place to write songs together in. So we just were really upfront with each other, and it was good. It was really fruitful songwriting exercise.
Were you having some trepidation about going solo and performing solo? I mean, even though you had a band behind you, you'd always been in Frente.
Yeah, I think I just put it off for a really long time. So obviously I've had a lot of side projects. Yeah. And I love to. I really love doing side projects. And I love to collaborate as well. And up until, I've just finished a new album, which I know you were segue. I know you were going there.
Of course.
So my next album that's about to come out is the first album that I haven't collaborated at all on, which is really unusual for me.
How did you find that?
Great, really hard and great. But I think that there's been a part of having that company along the way has always been something when you co-write.
Yeah.
there's always someone else that goes, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And that's a really nice thing to have. And I think I have not been ready to shake that off until this last record where I had to say, yes, I think that's a great idea.
Bill McDonald said of you that you have one of the most beautiful voices in Australian music and you're not given the credit you're due. What do you think about that?
Well, that's a very lovely thing for him to say. Yeah. I think he's an amazing bass player. He is. He's incredible.
He was part of Frente for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's been one of our long-standing members. So he was there when we recorded Shape and toured all through all of our overseas touring. Yeah, so
You've become a mum too, Isabella Peach Melba.
yeah.
Did you ever worry about how you'd make music and motherhood work?
Not really. I did wait a long time, and I did wait till I was with the right person. So I feel really pleased about that. But I know once I had her that I had this burning desire to do more work. It was a really strange, I don't know if that's hormonal, if there's any science there, but all of a sudden I got really busy and yeah, I worked a lot after I had her.
What would you like to tell young Angie that just started out as that 17-year-old about to go on the Punters Club stage after waiting outside in the freezing cold to take her turn onto the stage?
Take a breath, slow down, look around, make sure you say hello to a few people, ask them how their day is, and yeah, maybe take a moment to enjoy what's going on at that exact time.
Is that your biggest regret, that you didn't take the time to enjoy it?
I don't know how a person can. I think when you're young, you just plough through things in that way, and there's the dialogue in your head is much louder, and you take it so seriously. So I can't imagine it could have been different, but it would have been nice to be able to savour some of that.
What's the best advice you can give Isabella?
I can't.
No.
Yeah.
What was the best advice ever given to you?
I think I would go back to Archie Roach though, and say that was a wonderful and great take on what I would like to be. I think it has been quite a guiding, what would you call it, a telling of how he saw me.
Remind me what the quote was again.
You're plain, but you sing like a bird. I'm going to call you Little Magpie. Yeah.
I love that. Angie Hart, it's been wonderful getting to know you this afternoon here at the Australian Music Vault. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.